Welcome back to the second half of the event. Great, some of us are still here, and I'm looking forward to continue discussing progress with you. We are about to see a little film. It's a video lecture by Georg Seeßlen, who can't be here with us today because of the pandemic, like many. Also, Douglas Gordon can't be here, unfortunately, in the panel later on. Georg will talk about criticism, finally. I wish you a wonderful projection, and I would also like to use the moment to invite you to Critics Week in the Hackische Höfe Cinema. We are starting tomorrow screening films, and we will discuss every evening. So if you can't get enough, be around. See you.
At a mountain of problems for filmmakers all over the world, the issue of my keynote may seem like just one rock between many others. But on a second look, we could at least suspect a hidden importance. I'm talking about the connection between filmmaking and criticism. If we presume that they are both meaningful parts of a living film culture, we have to admit that they are bound together in creative processes as well as in crises. A crisis in filmmaking, of course, has its impact on criticism, but also a crisis in criticism has its impact on filmmaking. I presume there is a real profound crisis, and I want to pledge for a new alliance. Let me just mention some symptoms of this crisis. 1. The vanishing of traditional media for criticism. Magazines, reviews, newspapers, programs in public broadcasts, public discussions, and so on. Of course, there are new media, a lot of them, but this change of media does also something to the political economy of criticism. It becomes part of what Wolfgang Fritz Haug calls the online capitalism. We could talk about an Uberization or the changing of a critic into an influencer, but that would be too depressing for the moment. 2. The structural corruption and always worse dependencies on the cultural market. The power on this market has changed positions and has altered its functions. Criticism shifts from film culture to film marketing. The means of manipulating the media are always increasing. We are far from a fair play in the struggle for public attention. 3. The three elements of neoliberalism, digitalization, globalization, and privatization, after the relationship between art or popular culture and audience or consumers to an extent that a lot of our traditional theories of communication and aesthetics do not work any longer. So criticism today suffers from a lack of theoretical background. Yet the work on theory can always be very practical also for the filmmaking. Those were happy days in the film history when filmmaking and film theory were connected. 4. As we can see, within the so-called corona crisis, art, pop, culture, you name it, is treated in a way that it has to prove their relevance to be supported by governments and societies. According to some politicians, critical and independent art is no longer relevant, let alone criticism as a democratic institution. So again, we are united in a struggle for independence. 5. Militant conservatism, right-wing populism, and even neo-fascist movements have recognized culture, including criticism, as a battlefield for the so-called metapolitics. On the other hand, autocratic regimes repress opposition as well as on the streets in art, cinema, literature, and of course criticism. 6. Criticism, in other words, can be dangerous or can be threatened by increasing powers of anti-democratic forces. To say the least, we are united by the same enemies. All this is just a hint at an anatomy of crisis still to work out. But I think it's clear that all these elements are concerning criticism and filmmaking as well. Without a living, demanding, and manifold criticism, the space for films beyond the borders of entertainment industries will become more and more narrow. So we will have to work on new models of cooperations and alliances. We will have to keep in mind that such a crisis of criticism did not come by more or less natural changes of media techniques, cultural codes and tastes, or generation conflicts. The crisis is manufactured by interests, by power, by dependencies, by politics. If we really want to overcome the crisis, we have to deal with those interests, powers, dependencies, and politics. I'm afraid that won't come easy. Stepping forward from an analysis of this crisis, as I mentioned, the work still to do, I think we'll have to look for solutions on three levels. The first level concerns our professional and maybe even our personal life. It centers on a simple question: how can we go on? Or more dramatically, how can we survive? This concerns economy as well as a professional morality. For instance, how can we, as critics, earn a living without selling our souls? On this level, I want to offer 5 proposals. Of course, not as a solution for everything, but for a beginning of discourses and changes. 1. Critics of the world unite. We have to look for new forms of organizations, solidarity, and communication that empowers critics and criticism as a real political and economic player. We are used to that. Critics are solitarians in a constant competition. Maybe some of us are friendly and helpful to each other. We are not naturally born assholes, as some disappointed artists will mark us, but that is no compensation for a real political organization. A powerful organization of critics can also work for the other elements of film culture, for instance in creating new public spaces for films, or defend and develop the traditional ones. 2. We have to redefine criticism beyond divisions and classifications as well as in genres. Music, cinema, art, literature, comics, in a high-low model. This is high culture, this is pop, this is trash, and so on. Or in a methodic category like social criticism, aesthetic criticism, structural criticism. Criticism means questioning the power of language and the language of power. There is no such thing as an unpolitical criticism. The culture of tomorrow is cross-media, cross-culture, and cross-language. We have to cope with that dimensionality of culture. And that means also that we no longer will just sit there and watch a movie and then go home and write a review, but have to develop new ways of intermediation. A filmmaker gives his work away when it's finished. On its first away, this film will be accompanied by the critic. You need respect and confidence to accept this changing. 3. Everything a society, a government, a cultural institution does for the production and the mediation of culture, they have also to do for criticism. Criticism is no opposite, but part of culture. There is no culture without criticism. So we will urgently demand that criticism is part of cultural grant and assistance. It is necessary to understand that not only filmmaking but film culture as a whole needs social assistance. What good are films no one can see? 4. We will have to develop new forms and new genres of criticism. I don't think that expertise, valuation, and rating is the center of our labor in a world without privilege of information, but proposing context. The critic of the future is less judging and more curating. And that means also, 5, that we have to find new alliances between artists and critics. The critic will not belong as a counterpart, and in that feudalistic model, the judge, the king or queen, a czar, or even a pope of criticism, who decides what is art or not, who decides about careers of films and filmmakers, who tells success from failure, but a partner in a democratic dialogue between artist, audience, and reflection. If filmmaking is the soul of film culture, criticism is the mind, and they both need the body, the people who watch, listen, feel, and think. But this is a point where we have to work on a new theory of criticism in the age of internet and digital mega companies. So we reach the second level of our discourse. Here I will restrict myself to 3 basic elements of change. 1. We have to change education. Not only the education of forthcoming critics and filmmakers, but the education of hearing, watching, reading, and so on. The critic of the future is not a master or mistress of judgments, codes, and rankings, but a teacher of critical perception. He or she will enable the audience, not lead them. He or she will talk about possibilities, not opinions. We have to democratize, not popularize criticism. I think we need more projects that bring together criticism and filmmaking yet in the beginning, because audiovisual language is a very complex system. 2. We have to put this question on the agenda again and again. What is criticism? And what can it be? It is at the same time a state of mind, a way of communication, and a profession. Everyone can and should practice criticism, including filmmakers, of course. But that does not mean that we don't need professional criticism. Criticism is a basic element of any kind of democracy. Maybe this will also mean to democratize the process of preparing, financing, and producing films. Only together we could change the system of financing films, and I think it needs that change. 3. We have to work not only on new media and new genres of criticism, but also on new languages for it. Criticism can be a model for a self-controlling, learning, and growing semantic system. The language of criticism connects the language of art and the language of society. How can we talk about film? How can we learn to talk about film? How can we change the talk about film? Criticism is to say that it is not only marketing and power, not only industry and censorship to decide how we can talk about film. Making new films is impossible without a new talking about film. Therefore, I'm convinced criticism is not only about knowledge and judgment, it has to be creative in itself, especially if we look at the new techniques of simulation, illusion, representation, and virtual realities of the new future. Criticism will have to help to answer the three key questions. What is reality? What is representation? And what is language? And guess what? Filmmaking is about the same issues. And now, of course, after the practical and political level and after the methodic and theoretical level, we reach the third level of our discourse we could call the level of philosophy and self-consciousness of criticism. And this level is not as academic as one might think. It deals, for instance, with the grammar of understanding. Do I, as a critic, have to understand the work of art? Have I to understand the understanding of the work of art? Have I to understand the single artist? Have I to understand the single spectator? Have I to understand systems, codes, and traditions? Have I to understand reactions of the mind, the soul, the body to symbolic provocations? Have I to understand censorship or wish fulfilling? Have I to understand the psychoanalytical, the political, economical, the semiotic aspects of a complex system of communication that denies the final rationalization? And last but not least, have I to understand myself? So, on this third level, criticism is a model of the human world, the never-ending process of understanding and exploring. And the connection between criticism and filmmaking is a model for co-work in that exploration of reality and language. And you know what that means? Criticism has to be an enjoyment. Not in the sense of the entertainment industry, but in the sense of philosophy, where working and enjoying are no longer contradictions. Criticism in this context can be the search for the utopian promise in every work of art, every act of perception, and every democratic communication. And if this is true, we have to work on projects where filmmaking and criticism are not divided in one after the other way, but united in a constant creative process.
Guten Abend. Guten Abend allerseits. Mein Name ist Bert Rebhandl und ich habe gestern Abend, My name is Bert Rebhandl and yesterday evening I got a call from Dennis Vetter whether I would be ready and willing and whether it would be possible for me to fill in tonight as the moderator of this talk that is going to happen now. And I said yes. So this is the reason why I'm sitting here now. I probably said yes not to get your applause, although that's nice too, but I sympathize with the Woche der Kritik. I have done so for a long time. Anyway, there are three participants that I would like to ask to come to the stage now. Douglas Gordon unfortunately had to cancel very last minute this afternoon. Eva, please come, and Nadav and Laila. Where is Laila? Hello, Laila. I will briefly introduce Laila Pakalniņa, filmmaker from Latvia. Hello, Laila. Nice to have you here. Nadav Lapid, filmmaker based in Paris now, but from Israel, and having a very successful connection to Berlinale as well. Thank you. And Eva Sangiorgi, she's the director of Vienna Film Festival, Viennale. Nice to meet you, Eva. When I was listening now to Georg Seeßlen, and we were not briefed on it before, so it was new to us too. Yeah, we have a not completely easy task now, because what we got basically is three notions or three terms. Criticism, we were introduced to it, reintroduced to it now by what Georg Seeßlen said. The notion of progress and the notion of cinema. These three things is basically what we have and what we should work with and talk about. And we can enter from any of these sides. And we had not planned anything in advance. I just have to make up now, how do we start? And I would like to ask Laila, maybe out of the blue a little bit, but do you remember anything in your work and in your life when you had experiences with criticism that you find interesting, maybe to recollect and to give us a little start to talk about this term first?
I liked in this film or in this lecture that it was said that filmmaking is about soul and criticism is about brain or mind. And being close to soul, I'm not so good in using words. But what I wanted to say concerning criticism and the critics, that I love critics because if my films would be evaluated only according amount of audience, then I would be not anymore filmmaker. So thanks to critics, I'm still making films.
Do you have good critics in your country? And what about the international reception of your work? Are you satisfied with it so far? Have you found yourself read well?
Yes.
Maybe this is because of your films.
Both. It's because critics as well.
Absolutely, it's all, of course, interconnected. Nadav, can you maybe also improvise a little bit on what I asked Laila just now?
About you hear me? Yeah, it's okay. About what? About my relationship with critics?
No. That's too specific. Anything that you recollect about criticism as a phenomenon or as an aspect that you have encountered? It doesn't have to be film criticism per se, but maybe it is.
No, what I can say is that well, as you mentioned, like I was born, I grew up, and I worked mainly in Israel. Now I live in Paris, and it's true that if you talk about film critics, if you talk about criticism, if you talk about in general this frightening and terrible crisis of cinema, of certain cinemas from Paris, everything looks more safe and more convenient, because they still have 10,000 film critics, and still there are people who are rushing on a Wednesday morning to watch the first screening of extremely challenging film. So you feel that maybe it's the Titanic, but before it's not drawing yet. But what I could really relate to is the connection that I feel between the crisis of criticism or film critics and certain tendencies in filmmaking. And for me, I mean, I mainly here I relate a little bit to what I think Cynthia Gill said in a certain way at the end of her vehement speech. That I think that it's mainly related to the cinematic form. I mean, I think that film critics were supposed to be those who transform, who defend, who analyze, and in a way who push filmmakers to go deeper and deeper in their quest for new cinematic forms. Maybe filmmakers and maybe film critics and also directors of film festivals. But let's begin with film critics. And the moment that they are become weak or marginal, and they lose their confidence. So, like each person who loses his confidence, a lot of them tend to take the side of the powerful ones, which means those who have, I don't know, money, rating, and then this quest for this challenging quest for researching the cinematic form becomes marginal and is disappearing. And I must say that, I mean, I feel that for me, like if you would have resumed, if you would have to had to resume this crisis of filmmaking, I would have said it. I feel that there is a kind of almost a declaration of war against the form, as if the form became the form which was supposed to be, I think, the most essential and pure and beautiful element of filmmaking, since the form is exactly this thing that defines cinema as cinema. I mean, you can tell stories in literature, but the form is the thing that you can do only audiovisually. The form became a kind of, I feel that the form became a kind of burden for many people that you have to get rid of, and there is already like these also even like every nonsense finds also its ideological justification. So there is this idea that a mise en scène is a bourgeois thing, and that pure cinema, pure real cinema is instinctive. So it doesn't need the mise en scène. It just needs people who will say what they have in their hearts, or I don't know where. So I feel that in a way, what I was trying to say, that the commando of the form should have been should have included film critics and filmmakers. And today it's like it's an empty commando. There are 2, 3, 4 people there, but it's disappearing.
Thank you, Nadav. Eva, can you maybe also give us a little idea of what aspects of criticism have you run into and found interesting so far in your work?
Yeah, good evening, everybody. Can you hear me? Yeah. It's different, my position, because I run a film festival and always been working from the side of promoting and organizing, despite not being a critic myself, also, of course, close to the exercise of writing and thinking through and reflecting when I do a program and when I put together the films, when I make the selection and I have to promote it. But so the criticism, I feel something that is very much in part of my procedures and inspiration as well, and in a dialogue. Of course, everything that has been said here and also in the lecture before is true, and so general. The fact is that making critics and criticism involve different kind of practices, and that have been changing and probably are facing a big crisis as cinema in relation to the audience as well. That it's difficult to consider as a unique concept, criticism. Of course, I'm not approaching in the way the lecture did, in a very ethical way, in a very inspirational. And so in the pure concept of criticism, for the love and sake of cinema and promoting the developing, the changing of the cinematic form, I believe that organizing a festival and promoting films and film criticism are strictly related. In my leader practice, of course, I also tried to open up spaces. But I'm also working in a festival as a privileged position that can have another kind of reason towards the things that are happening. I mean, a very much more not inclusive, but wider overlook on what is happening. Is not connected to the exercise of writing on cinemas and on films, that is connected to the marketing and other kind of the film business that have been approached also in the lecture. So I don't know, I've been general as well, but hope makes sense.
No, very good, thank you. From my personal, I'm a film critic. This is mainly what I do, and one of the basic things from how I understand this work is that I have to begin with, I have to describe with what I have to deal with, what I see in front of me. Maybe we could try a little bit this exercise. It's a very general question again, but we can find aspects of it. What would be aspects of the current situation that we live in with regard to cinema? But even I'd be interested a little bit more general, even, from where we are, where we come from, where we live. What are aspects of this situation that you find that are really important? I think Nadav said already one thing, this antipathy against form, or like this disinterest in formal aspects of art, which I observe as well, is something that we should talk about, but maybe a little bit more later. Maybe we'll start again with you, Laila. What would be things that you find in your current situation that are really important in your perception? Like what is crucial for the way we live, the way you make art, the way your art is perceived?
I would rather say that all this pandemic situation is nothing out of nothing like special, nothing out of human experience. If I take out of my life, out of my filmmaker's life, like a moment from, let's say, 10 years ago, was it more easy life or was it more difficult? I would not say like this. Like what I wanted to say is that that my philosophy of life, understanding of life, it is that each moment is very important, each moment is very different, and there are no easier times or harder times. Of course, I'm not talking about like war, but okay, COVID. And for me, there are. I can say that I also worried about. I even would not say form, but about language, which we need to preserve. This is film language, which was created with those like Lumière's, Eisenstein, Godard, all those people, they were talking this language. And if we talk about progress, I don't know, but we need to worry about regress of this film language. We are not using this film language anymore. We are illustrating stories. This is my, I'm not so, I can't do anything with pandemic, but I can do maybe something with this.
This is an interesting idea because it would mean a little bit by implication that progress for cinema or for filmmaking or for storytelling in cinema or using the medium of film would actually to go back to certain moments in its history where it has already been further ahead than it is now, maybe at some point?
Like if we talk in general in films, then yes. If we pick out some festival winners, something, some which are recognized with festivals, but some which are called like, what they are called, those, like me, who are somewhere in the corner, like, okay, not mainstream. Yeah, but if
but also not marginalized, you know. But
no, not marginalized. But
like auteurs, yeah, like people who have.
Okay, let's call them authors.
Yeah. I know
yeah,
it's a very complicated term, but it says that you use cinema in an individual way, like you personally developed it for yourself.
But it's not so much personally about me. I'm just talking about this big amount of films. Which are not using film language. If we compare with like beginning of 20th century, it was more, they were more filmic.
You could say 1910 to 1960 and then
I would
it went down.
I would even say 95.
Yes, absolutely. But that would be an interesting idea because that now gets us closer to talking about progress. That would basically mean if we want to talk about progress now, we first have to talk about a backlash that has happened. And there has actually, this term has been used quite often, for example, from women, you know, a backlash against feminism and in a lot of other things as well. Even if we look at Ukraine and Russia now, the possibility that there could be a war again in Europe was unthinkable like for a long time. This is also a backlash. There is also a backlash, if I understand you correctly, in art, because art has forgotten about film art has forgotten about what it already knew at some point. And why does it, can you, Eva, and you, can you share this idea a little bit? Do you think it's misleading us, or can you subscribe to it to a certain degree?
I don't. I mean, I'm a totally not a nostalgic person and not a nostalgic filmmaker. Like, first of all, I don't think that in the past there were better films and better filmmakers. I mean, there are years when there are, I don't know. Last year, when my film was in Cannes, I had a feeling that in the Cannes competition there were excellent movies. But so I don't share this idea. I think that I can talk, for instance, about myself, about my generation of filmmakers. I think that if I might say we to talk in the name of others, but that we live in a different reality than, for instance, filmmakers in the 70s. Because I think that a filmmaker in the I guess, I don't know, but I guess that a filmmaker in the 70s felt that he's dealing with the most, with the form of art that shows, that represents, that express in the best way the life of people around him, and that everyone is feel the same. I mean, it was the art of majority. And today we are in a domain of the minority, and it's a different starting point. I mean, it's a different starting point. I remember that years ago when I made my first feature, I met the director of a big film festival, and he told me, "Your generation, it's going to be the first generation of good filmmakers." Without public, without audience, and I mean, we can see here we are we are the minority, and I mean it's something. It's a difference. It's not only negative. It can be also interesting to belong to the minority. Just something that I think that people should confront and understand. But as I said, I'm not nostalgic, and because I'm not nostalgic, I'm a big believer in celebrating the present while criticizing the present. I mean, I think the present is for me, is the only thing that exists since it won against the past, because the past disappeared and the present is here. So if I think, for instance, about this COVID time, so I feel that there's something, I mean, except for this question, you know, when you write a script now, if people should wear or shouldn't wear masks, I mean, you don't know when the film will be done, if masks will be already a historical object or not. But except for this thing, I mean, I feel, for instance, that there's something hysterical at this moment, something hysterical and something shallow, and I think that it's very interesting to play with. I mean, for years, I think the distinction, there was a kind of banal distinction between auteur cinema and commercial cinema, and the idea was that commercial cinema, everything is happening very fast, while auteur cinema, you know, the auteur cinema was this cinema where people should have patience and sit in front of screens and watching a sequence shot of 25 minutes. Now, I'm not against a sequence shot of 25, I'm not against at all, but I think that it's interesting also to bring it into this auteur cinema, the history, the vibration, not already only interesting, it's the truth of the moment. And if you want to make a film that express the truth of this moment, that for me, maybe this is the main role of filmmaker. So in a way, I expect them also to be vibrating, to be hysterical, to be intelligent and stupid at the same time, like we all are, especially this moment.
For example, like Radu Jude, would be a film.
For instance, I had I mean, I was in the jury of the Berlinale, and we giving the Golden Bear to Radu Jude film, which is a good example. And I was a big supporter of the movie, and it wasn't easy, but I think that at the end, what also the other jury members understood, and I hope that also people that will watch it will understand it. On the top of the question, it's such a good representation of this moment in time, and this turns this movie really an important object.
And this moment in time is not only the moment of masks and of Corona, but also of like gigantic SUVs that make people crazy and lock everything down in Bucharest. But that's only one aspect of a very interesting movie. Eva.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that many doors have been opened here. Very interesting. But just staying with Radu Jude, that is a fantastic example. But I would like to only mention something related to that maybe is exactly the space of festivals, that is the possibility of opening a kind of discussion and arena and thinking also on not so politically correct thinking or behavior or way of approaching that is the politically correct, a very also complicated and dangerous side of our society nowadays. And so I believe also that is a great moment for cinema, and I'm not nostalgic at all, even if I love, of course, history and of everything in cinema in particular. I believe that we should talk more about movements and progress, because of course progress is a term that is connotated and related to an economic development that of course goes in, I mean, at least in the economic culture we're living in, to a point of not possibilities in a neo-capitalistic way. So movements are important. It's not a problem to go back and forth, and this is always a changing and a transformation. And I think the cinema is proving every year that there are infinite possibility to explore. And then anyhow, Nadav, I would think that people probably are watching more films now in a way than before. There are more films available to be seen, even if they're not, the program is much more diverse and there are much more possibilities, much more productions. And of course, at the same time, our habits change, and they are not only that festival and that films that everybody would watch and that theaters in cinemas that will be full, because there are much more possibilities and also much more media. Despite I'm of course working for theaters and I believe in being together, watching films in the old way. Now there's an expansion. This also brings other virtuosity. So I believe that it's good to make a film now. We should ask Amos Vogel when he was bringing cinema in the United States, films that are so familiar to us and that was impossible to see 60 years ago, 70 years ago.
Nadav?
Yeah, I wanted to say banal things, so leave it. No, I would be interested to hear what you think about it, because yes, there is this, of course, each filmmaker I think is dealing with this question about what you said, that people are watching more movies, so they watch it in streaming and they watch it on their screens, and does it matter, or maybe it doesn't matter. I remember just in the Viennale, in the last Viennale, I had maybe 5 hours of debate about it with Bruno Dumont, with a filmmaker, about exactly this question. But I don't know. Maybe there's some. But that's why I wanted to say that it's a banal. I'm in person. I'm someone that before, when my film is released in a theater, so I go to the theater and I oil personally each seat in order that it will not make noise during the screening, and I'm so hysterical about this thing because I think that, and I think that I'm right. I think that I'm right because you know that filmmaking is about essence and 20,000 details, and if you don't watch a movie in a theater, the only thing that remains is the essence, and even the essence doesn't remain because the essence is composed of details. So you stay with a kind of silhouette of the movie. You don't watch the movie; you watch the synopsis. But maybe it's anachronistic, and maybe it's in a way it's a lost battle. I don't know.
No, I don't think this is anachronistic. We all want to keep on going on theater, but the situation is getting more complicated and diverse. Many films, many media, and but at the same time, if you put all together, there are more possibility for more diversity, and this is a good side that we can work. At least we can be a motivation to keep on working.
Well, because this streaming thing is also a part of the death of the form, because the form is not only a question of language. I think the form, it's a language, but I think for me, I think the form is the only real provocation when you make a movie. I don't think that content-wise you can really provoke, but with form you can provoke. And go to Netflix and tell them that you want to provoke formally with your next movie, and the next thing that you'll see is the street and the door. You won't be able to make a movie. So I think it's also it's a way of controlling the filmmaker.
It could also be understood that way, that you can say that Netflix is in itself a form that is so powerful that any diversity of form that an artist would bring to it is negligible versus the form that Netflix is, or like similar institutions. Which brings me to a question also again to the three of you, starting with Eva. You have made a festival, run a festival in Mexico City. And now you are running a festival in Vienna, which is probably one of the richest, most privileged places in the world. It would be interesting to compare even like these two situations. Like, is it even like the same notion of cinema that you experience in these two cities? And drawing the question a little bit wider, is there anything? You have all traveled. You are filmmakers. You go places. You go to festivals. when you go to other places, is there something that you would call a common notion of cinema that still exists globally and that people can relate to when they go to Jerusalem or to Latvia or to Buenos Aires or to Busan or to Vienna or now to Berlin in this week?
Yeah, I mean, start from the personal experience. Yeah, I mean, in my case, I worked in a festival in another scale than the Viennale, but with the same motivations in a way, and completely free as the Viennale. So it is not very much related to the healthiness or wealthiness of the country, but more that both are spaces of privileged spaces of content, and where they can find an audience naturally. In Mexico was another scale, but was organized by a university, so was naturally encountering a very curious audience all the time and young. And in Viennale, yeah, this is a festival that is very special. It's a festival that can only happen physically. It's a festival that does not have any competition, that can really present freely a selection of films in the variety of cinema nowadays. And there's always a fantastic audience because it's part of the cultural ritual of the city. And I inherited like that. So it's working fantastically because of these elements that are part of the idiosyncrasy of the cinema itself, getting together and sharing reflecting what's going on around through cinema's lenses. And so I don't know. I've been living in this world of in this comfort zone of film programming, luckily. I've been connected to that, and so I recognize this here and everywhere. Then the festivals are diverse as the festival world. Me, I can talk about the cinema culture from this perspective, but I recognize many events here and there. They are so important because, in a way, are a part of a kind of resistance in comparison to the other side of the film business. And so, I don't know, it's very difficult. I don't know if I can answer more specifically your question.
Laila, if I would suggest this working definition that comes basically from what we have talked so far, that cinema might be a site for the protection of the attention to form, you know? First of all, can you relate to that? Is it something that you find plausible? And secondly, does it exist somewhere in your country, maybe, in your opinion, this notion, this idea of cinema?
Couldn't get it. First part I understood, but what relation with my country?
No, it's just, I'm also generally always interested to hear about your experience from where you are from, but you can also, like this cinema, this idea of cinema that protects other than other institutions that actually don't protect this attention for. You're not a formalistic filmmaker, but you are a filmmaker who has a keen eye for form. You're more interested, you're not just interested in plain storytelling.
Yeah, but it's not so much about me. Maybe it's about audience and about audience not only in Latvia but in every country, that we perceive what we see. Film we perceive through form. Is it? We perceive what we see through form, and I think it makes this. I again will use this word language. It's like maybe banality, but it makes our language universal, and I really experienced this while traveling with my films around the world, that sometimes I couldn't, okay, I have screening in Taiwan, and I can't say in few sentences before film all the history of my country. And then I understand, I just say them just, if you don't understand my films, it's nothing wrong, because films for me are not about understanding, but about feeling. Just try to relax and just watch and try to feel it, and it works. And maybe in Taiwan more than in Latvia, unfortunately, but it works.
Very good. Let's make it a little bit more complicated and highlight now the notion of progress a little bit in relationship to that. Maybe Nadav could talk about that first. Is there, when we talk about form, is there anything still possible that we could call progress? Because if we look at arts, in the arts, it's basically understood everything has already been done, brilliantly done, and everything is still possible to do again, of course. But it's not basically assumed that something could come up that is really like progress in form, like to progress the form, And for the cinematic medium, do you think, is there anything still possible?
Some years ago, I was with, it was in a student film festival in Tel Aviv, and they invited as a guest Leos Carax, and we had a kind of a discussion about mise en scène, filmmaking. I don't know if you ever interviewed Carax, but usually he said either yes or no or nothing. So it's but this time it was a kind of, at a certain moment the conversation became kind of pretty animated. And I remember, I think that he was the one who was saying something that I really kept in mind exactly about this. He said that he compared like us, like filmmakers, to these Spanish or Portuguese colonialists or first colonialists of the, 16th century or something like this, that arrived with their boats to the, to the beach, for instance, of Brazil or of Argentina, and put their flags, on the beach and said, okay, Brazil is ours. So while there were, of course, still endless jungles, but they prefer to stay on the coast, on the beach, and in a way the reason I think they prefer is, like you see in any adventurous movies, that when you start to go deep in the jungle, what you see there, you see the skeletons of the previous ones who tried to, and ended as skeletons. But so I think, so I think that it's a dangerous task to dig inside the form and to go deeper and to go to the jungles of cinema. But at the same time, it's an obligation. I mean, I can't imagine. I would say we do our films more or less like the Frères Lumière. I can't think about an artistic domain who wasn't renovating itself like cinema. I mean, think about, I don't know, painting or something like this. I mean, we can't imagine someone tomorrow showing a new exhibition in a gallery with a painting of the Mona Lisa. But in cinema, we do it all the time. And I don't know. I think that each filmmaker should wake up in the morning, sweating, asking himself, what am I doing? What will I do differently? Or how can I go deeper? And it's not about, of course, technique. It's only about, at the end, cinema. It's a basic thing. It's like it's a camera, and it's what is in front of the camera. But on this X of camera, what is in front of the camera, you can get, and you should get to the moon, and you should get to the moon in 10,000 different ways.
The term progress comes from, if I'm not mistaken, or at least partly, it comes from the wider idea of enlightenment as such. You know, thinking about history as a progress, and a progress maybe to a better humanity, is a very recent concept in a way. And funnily, we seem to be a generation that faces backlashes with this concept also in many ways. But it was also always a part of art, and also of the forms of art, to be, or like to initiate or to support or even like to instigate progress on other levels, you know, ethical, moral progress, like also progress in liberty, to be completely free, ideally, and everything like that. What do you think, maybe Laila again first, what do you think, is it still sustainable to put such hopes into your practices of filmmaking, into our dealing with films, into our panel discussions and all these things?
Yes, because if we consider film as art, then of course, because art is something unique. So a piece of art is already progress compared what is done before. That's why I believe in film as art, and then there are some things what I don't believe what is happening. For example, if we make if film is art, how it is possible to go to many of those when they teach you, when you are already grown up, and then those consultants come and say how you should make what you are making, and what is right and what is wrong. And I kind of don't believe that someone can come and say you how you must make your work, because it's your work. I can't imagine how it could happen to composer or painter, but with filmmaking, of course, I understand it is part of industry. And if someone, let's say producer, consider it as a product, then they need to make this product, and then they invite advisors. But I believe in filmmaking as unique. It is possible to make unique piece of art, and then it is progress.
I'm glad that you put it like this. Still, these hopes have often been disappointed, and we live in a system, if we can put it like as general as that, but we live in a system where all these like explosive energies of art have always been basically instantly like appropriated by the system and have been commodified, all these things, and also have been taken the sting out of it. Eva, are you also like, would you also be as optimistic as Laila? You see a lot of films, we all do, but you see a lot of films every year, and you see how much originality and everything is there, but still, like, what do you think about the impact? Is it still possible?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we have to be optimistic as Laila and as a creator. That is the way to be. But if I have to do an analysis of what is produced and realized in the cinema field is so diverse, and again, it's complicated. I believe that in all cultural expressions, and particularly in films, because as the aspect of entertainment very connected, and the aspect of the business very much connected, unfortunately, there are two forces in contrast always, and one is very scaring. Of course, a progression, if we understand that terms in a way of evolution or getting better or getting over limits and to a better understanding. But at the same time, there are a lot of conservative forces, and in conservatives in a sense of reactionaries, and that is of course a part of the cinema that is more promoted by certain kind of platforms and media, and so this is a territory of a lot of fighting, and it's true. This is why there are then places that are this part of resistances, like festivals and criticism. No, because I really believe it. When I was mentioning the problem of politically correct, talking about Radu Jew, is one aspect of this reactionary force. That even the ethical washing, the greenwashing, and all the good feeling. Business behind a certain kind of production is very, very dangerous, and we are in contact everywhere, also in the art spaces, more and more.
It's also like I will try to get a little bit further with the idea of form or the notion of form, because if we look at our situation, we have, for example, also from my personal experience last year during the pandemic, there were a lot of online film festivals. I saw more films than ever last year, and many of them were really good. I saw maybe 50 documentary films that were excellent from all parts of the world. There's so much talent outside, but the superstructures, so to speak, that we're living in, capitalism, the technology that has allied or like that has emerged out of capitalism, they have, in my opinion, or in my view, they have become so overwhelming that all these expressions of talent, of individual talent, somehow I'm skeptical that they can really like be more than like little glimpses of light within something that is totally doesn't care about that at all anymore. I mean, we have so much individual talent, more than ever, I think, in history, because more countries now produce talent and have infrastructure, whatever. Nadav, I'm so sorry, I'm a little tired. But, like, is this when you make a film, when you think about a project, when you have an idea, and when you want to express yourself to the utmost with your inventiveness of forms, and or when you want to go as far as possible as you can, do you feel that there is still this utopian hope that you can destroy the superstructure, or do you even want to? Maybe you don't want. Or maybe you don't think it's necessary.
No, of course it's necessary, and it's a good question. I mean, I feel that, and this is maybe one of the dangers that filmmaking is facing now. That I feel that filmmakers must be, or filmmaking or cinema must be, must perceive itself as a huge thing, as an essential. I mean, I don't believe in modest, marginal cinema. I think that cinema is an art. I don't know. I look, for instance, at poetry in Israel. Okay, so maybe, I don't know, in the 60s, in the 70s, poets were national heroes. Today there are like, I don't know, there are maybe 30 people gathering in a small club. One is reading poems on the stage, the other poets are the audience, then they change. And I guess it's also damaging poetry, but I can't imagine cinema functioning like this. I think that each filmmaker has, but basically a filmmaker, I think, should feel that he speaks, or that he's able to speak to universe, that he stands on the sun or on the moon and talks to humanity, and I think that cinema that will feel itself marginalized, weak cinema cannot exist. And it's strange. As I said, I think this is like, I remember, well, it's a very personal story, but I remember that I met, maybe 5 years ago, it's not so personal actually, but I remember that 5 years ago I met a filmmaker, and 6 years ago, I think after my second feature, in a film festival in Lisbon. He was a filmmaker from Argentina. He was maybe 60 years old, something like this. And it's a guy who had like movies in Venice, in Cannes, in Berlin, not maybe in the main competition, but like and a good filmmaker. And I remember that he was talking to me about a terrible wave of cold in Buenos Aires, and he told me something like, for me it was particularly hard because I didn't have enough money to pay for the electricity. And so I couldn't use heaters, so I really suffered. And I remember I told myself, "Wow, what a terrible future!" Like he was like an institutionalized filmmaker, and I remember that I told myself, "Okay, it's like, I mean, the law of survival or becomes more and more harsh in this profession of filmmakers, and especially in what you call like auteur filmmaker or something like this. I mean, in a way, either you bright or you die, but or you sit with blankets because you don't have money for electricity. But to answer your question, yeah, I think that filmmakers. I don't think that films change the world, but I think that filmmakers must believe that films change the world, because otherwise they wouldn't be able to say cut and action.
In the 20th century, it was, of course, integral for the understanding of cinema, as with all other arts, that this has to be possible, this groundbreaking, this utopian notion that one piece of art can take on the whole ideologies of the world, the whole whatever. Anyway, I think it's a moment, a good moment to invite you to say something if you want, ask a question, or contribute an opinion. Raise your hand or give another signal if you want. Otherwise, we will continue. Yes, please. Maybe there is a microphone, or I don't know.
Some years now is being talking again and again about the irrelevance of criticism in art, because the market, because the whole, what really bring the artists to become famous and to make in a career is, the major collectors or corporations and things. And that's the same thing for films, in the sense that some films, they just, a lot of people see the box office, and someone can write pages and pages, and we know, because in here we write a lot of pages, and all the time the film critics would bring people in the cinemas. But then now is the question, is getting also film criticism in one part, like for example, Laila talked about the one way that she sees the way she makes the film and how criticism have a part on that, and others maybe think, okay, it doesn't matter, I do my film, and whatever likes, watch it or not. So, how you see the criticism is something the dichotomy, in parts is good, in parts are getting some of the models of criticism out of date.
Is there any reply to that? I did not exactly get if there was a question or was it more a statement. I'm sorry.
The criticism is getting also becoming irrelevant.
Okay. Is it, I mean, this is basically like everybody would used to subscribe to that, that criticism has become more or less irrelevant. Of course, at least some type of criticism that is, for example, interested in form to a degree that a wider audience would not be interested in anymore. But has criticism become irrelevant in general? It's probably too general to say it like that. You already answered in a way with your very first statement, Laila, that to the opposite in a way.
But then it is maybe not criticism which became irrelevant. Maybe then we can't call it criticism. Mm-hmm. Maybe.
What has become irrelevant? What has been relevant before that has maybe lost relevance?
Okay, maybe, and I think it's like formal thing, but we need to divide. There are film critics and there are people who write about films, and there are two different types of talking about films. And that's it. I'm more about with critics, not about those who write about films.
Anybody else who would like to say something or felt inspired to? Yes, please.
Thank you. I wanted to know, Nadav and Laila, Standstill, I think, is part of your films also. We talked a lot about progress now, but maybe you can say something about slowness and not moving, and how is it important in your films, and maybe also if it is more important now than before or less?
I think it's always important. I somehow understand standstill is like if you swim against current, then if you stand still, you already winning this current. And yes, I like static shots.
I like less and less static shots, but I think that if you like movement, you like also if you like immobility, you like also mobility, because movie it's about contradictions, and I think that if you want to create contradictions inside your film, you must you must have both. Yeah, but yeah, I think that in a way it's at the end it's not about movement, it's not about mobility or immobility or standstill or progress. It's about liberty that means also chaos. And I think that I think that the places where we can go deeper and dig inside is when is playing with control and loss of control. And maybe behind these words of control and loss of control, there is also a standstill and progress.
Can we maybe, you are invited anytime to add more, but I will have another question, maybe if it's interesting, I'm not sure, but can we try to give it another twist by thinking about maybe products of the cultural industry of the moment, mainstream things, or even a Netflix series, or something that is really popular, something that is really, we would consider an expression of the dominant industry at the moment. That, at the same time, would also be, in your view, progressive in terms of form, subversive maybe, or just plain interesting, or maybe even critical, you know, because the industry was always able to criticize itself as well, and had always like aspects of reflexivity and interesting things. And the mainstream was never completely dull. Yeah.
I mean, it's not. I don't think that like the mainstream is dark, and anyhow, you know, this distinction between mainstream and they are not. At the end, they are not really, I think, in a way interesting, but they are kind of sociological. But in person, I must say that I'm more curious about visuals that you can see in YouTube or in I don't know, TikTok or stuff like this, and the way people are shooting themselves. Then the products of Netflix, for instance, because in the products of Netflix, I generalize, but I feel the format, and I feel a kind of you know, a kind of attempt to make profits out of what they identify as the right thing. But what you look for is the French call it cru, for the rare meat, and the rare meat you can see it exactly, I think, in this, and this is also why I like immobility now, because there's something. I mean, because I feel that the truth now is vibrating in these cellular phones, and I don't know. I mean, I think that all this aesthetic is so fascinating. I would love to see films with 10,000 cellular phones inside, because I don't know, because you go outside to the street and the only thing that people are doing is looking at their cellular phones. So there must be right.
Eva, you are like the Viennale, for example, is has a certain type of films. There would other types of films would be a surprise. Were you ever tempted to add something that would like break the system a little bit, or is it, or in your personal life, like, do you how do you consume cinema? Like, do you also have something what used to be called guilty pleasures that you would not share with your regular audience, or things like?
Yeah. I mean, there are two different questions. I mean, concerning the first part, things that were breaking in the sense to be very commercial, you mean?
Possible, yeah.
I think that there are, I don't know, I don't have a completely negative opinion towards films that are produced also in different way or start being produced by Netflix. Netflix also supported the leader filmmakers, like talking about cell phones. There's una pellicola de policía that was here, Alonso Ruiz Palacio last year in Berlinale with from Mexico. It was also kind of very experimental in a way, or very challenging in the form. But they are trying to do another politics of getting the authors, but this is a long story. I included films from Netflix in my program, certain few, but that I consider great author films, even so. I also believe there are films that are genre film or films of a popular taste in a way, or it belongs to a tradition of popular films, like also, I don't know, kung fu films or action or the genres, the horrors or whatever. Depending on the film itself, can be very revealing, and sometimes you can also have the other looker to that, and it's also a part of the responsibility of in criticism and the festival. I don't think I've discovered anything through the program. But there are cases of films that are also more for a big audience that I believe have the strength and the importance of being considered authors' films. I'm not interested in series very much, even if I enjoy from time to time. Maybe it's a guilty pleasure. I'm not an expert. I watch every kind of films also that I will never program, and I enjoy, like 007, but I'm not so guilty. Don't feel.
Exactly. Yeah, it's also an antiquated notion. There is one more opportunity for you to, if somebody would like.
Maybe we can continue outside.
Yes, I was thinking too, because yes. That's the signal, Connie, that I was waiting for. Thank you very much. And one of the consequences of our talk
That's a liberation now. Okay.
Probably that we are not doing any wrap-up. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's longer. It's longer. How much did we talk? 1 hour and a half?
Yeah, but it was including this.